we help people get out of Section 12. It's getting them into the right facility where they belong and not sitting in a room and being medicated by doctors that have met them briefly for hours. And some of the doctors that I've dealt with patients and clients, they've done a Zoom call with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has made a determination on their life and gave them a medication and said, here, try this, and we'll monitor you for a week in the hospital. And when that one doesn't work, then they'll say, let's try this one for a week, and they'll give them another medication, and it just goes on and on.
It's The Journey with drug and alcohol attorney Mark G. Astor.
Welcome to The Journey with Mark Astor. I'm your host, Mark Astor. I spent a lot of years sitting across the table from people during some of the most challenging moments of their lives. As an attorney, an advocate, and as someone who understands that the road isn't always straight. What I've learned is that success, recovery, and growth rarely look the way we expect them to. There are detours, hard conversations, and moments that change everything. On this podcast, I talk with people who are willing to be honest about their journey, what worked, what didn't, and what they wish they knew sooner. I'm so excited to have this guest on. This is my good friend, Jimmy Kane. Jimmy is a graduate of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, where he received a certification in alcohol, drug counseling, and criminal justice. Jimmy is highly regarded as an effective advocate within the court system for those seeking addiction treatment. The path is proven as the most justifiable path for an individual versus jail time, which has never proven to be effective for those seeking recovery assistance. In addition, Mr. Jimmy is a certified life and success coach as well as a certified intervention specialist with many years' experience helping substance abuse patients, assisting them with placement in treatment facilities around the country. Jimmy has a unique passion for addressing individual clients' needs, engaging them with the utmost respect and dignity. I read this, Jimmy, and I'm like, this doesn't really do him justice, because if you've ever watched the movie The Town with Ben Affleck, this is who we're really talking to today. So,
Yeah.
and in many ways, I'm like, the movie's really about your life story.
I just found out on Friday that my brother-in-law who raised me, his son wrote a book about him, and it's about the mystery man on Penn Central Station, where my brother-in-law had a heart attack and died, carrying a large sum of money. And I was reading it last night. I was flying into Florida, and I was reading it on the plane, and I just couldn't put the book down. And I texted with his son, Billy Jr., who was the writer. He wrote it. He did a great job. Like, I couldn't put the book down. I did 75 pages. And that's how we grew up in Charlestown, where I grew up with my brothers and sisters. I'm the youngest of six. And since then, all my siblings, except for my elderly sister, who's 83, who lives in Ocala, Florida, and she's the last survivor with me. It gets interesting what they went through with me as a child.
And I want to talk about that. So it's funny, you and I met really through the hockey world. So Jimmy knows just about every great hockey player that's ever played the game. Jimmy is connected to. My wife and I, Audra and I, used to go up to Boston because my dad was playing hockey at Suffolk. We used to spend a lot of time together. But I think our real connection is the whole behavioral health space. So he is our contact in the New England area. Anybody that gets either Section 12, which is our version, the Massachusetts version of the Baker Act, or Section 35, which is the Massachusetts version of the Marchman Act, goes through Jimmy. Anybody who's looking for help with a behavioral health issue up in that area, Jimmy is our go-to. There's nobody, at least in my experience, that knows more about the judicial system, more about behavioral health. He's also very connected to the governor, and you are Mr. Boston. That's how I look at it. You are Boston, right?
Well, there's a lot of people that are friends of mine that I've come across and crossed paths with that we're friends today that have a lot of good knowledge and have taught me along the way, because we always got to remain teachable,
Yes,
as you have taught me.
and you may. But I want to back up a second. You grew up in Boston, right? In Charleston.
I grew up in Charlestown, Mass.
Tell me about that. What was it like growing up in Charleston, Mass?
It was a rough time in a lot of people's lives in Charlestown, because there was a lot of criminal activity, and there was a lot of good families, and there was a lot of good families that the criminal activity was just, it became normal. It was normal to walk into someone's house and their parents would have guns, drugs, and money on the table, and it didn't even phase us. We just kept our mouth shut and kept it moving. Didn't ask any questions, made it like it wasn't even there. And those are the guys that I wanted to be like when I was in my childhood. I was like 15, and I wanted to be with those guys that had the flashy cars, the girls, and they didn't work and they had plenty of money. And I just didn't know how they were doing it until, because you never asked any questions what they were doing, how they were doing it. You just didn't ask those questions. It's just, they would think you were up to something if you did ask. And we figure it out pretty quickly when we were kids. My group of guys that I hung around with, we figured it out pretty quick, and we acted on a few things and didn't really work out too well, because we weren't as advanced and knowledgeable as those guys were. Most of those guys are doing lengthy prison sentences, and you would never realize that they were some of the nicest guys that you would ever. They would give you the shirt off their back. They were the nicest guys in the town, and it's something that they did for a living. And some of them did it for a living. Some of them did it for the adrenaline rush. When I got married in '79, I had 11 guys in my wedding and a maid of honor. And my wife picked the maid of honor, and I had 11 ushers in the wedding. And there's only me and one other guy that are left that were in that wedding party.
What happened to the rest of them?
They've all passed away from either drug addiction or my older brother that's above me. He was shot and killed in an after hours party at an after hours club, drug and alcohol infested. And allegedly, the person that did it was 18 years old. And of course, back then, we don't talk about it today, because we realized that it was an alcohol and drug infested party that went bad, drugs and alcohol. That part of my life, I kind of went on like a 20-year run, as we would call it, with alcohol and drugs, and kind of ruined my family, my wife and kids. I would go home, throw a few dollars on the table, and the rest of it would go. But then there were days when I had a lot of money and I would throw a lot of money on the table. But those days weren't that often. My poor wife, ex wife, she tolerated it for a long time. And then it just came to an end. We got divorced. And then my three kids went through it with her, alcohol and drugs. They were all multiple years sober today, and they're all very successful. I'm very proud of them, as we've all overcome addiction for today, because it's one day at a time. And I love my life today. I love working with you and Audra and Asta Simovich Law. Very knowledgeable with what you do, and I've learned a lot from you. And now we help people. We help people get out of Section 12s, and it's not getting them out of it. It's getting them into the right facility where they belong, and not sitting in a room and being medicated by doctors that have met them briefly for hours. And some of the doctors that I've dealt with, patients and clients, they've done a Zoom call with a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has made a determination on their life and gave them a medication and said, "Here, try this, and we'll monitor you for a week in the hospital. And when that one doesn't work, then they'll say, let's try this one for a week, and they'll give them another medication, and it just goes on and on."
All right, Jimmy, let me stop you for a second. I'm going to go back to this for a second. I think one of the questions I never asked you in all the years we've known you is, what were your parents like?
My mother was Nana Kane to everybody in Charlestown. Everybody knows my mother, knew my mother. My mother passed away about 3 years ago, and everybody knew her as Nana Kane. She was everybody's Nana. And my father died when I was 3 years old of alcoholism. He died of rheumatic fever. Back then, they didn't know what that was. It was alcohol like poisoning, and that made me grow up without a father. My mother used to tell me stories, and I don't remember them, but I remember the stories she would tell me. Hiding in the back seat of the car when he was getting in the car from work. My mother had 6 children that she raised alone. I was the youngest of all. I was the last to leave the nest, and she was Ma Baka, we used to call her, because she would protect her cubs, nobody's business. None of us could ever do any wrong. And me being the last to leave the nest, I had a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol myself, and she just couldn't quite understand why that I was screwed up on drugs and alcohol. And it started alcohol, and then it went to drugs. I stopped drinking alcohol, and then went into the drugs became more important. And then my kids, my mother was like the nanny for my wife and myself, and she kind of, while we worked, or if I was like working, doing other criminal activity, she would see me coming down the stairs, and she would stop at the bottom of the stairs from the second floor, and she would say, "Knock it off, knock it off." And I knew what she meant, but I had to go out the door and make money. And whatever I was doing wasn't good. And that's how my life wasn't good. And today I kind of try and make up for some of the lives that I ruined from selling drugs. I sold drugs for a long time, and I kind of feel like I'm making amends to the people that I ruined their lives. And it's been working out pretty good for the last 17 years. So that's where I stand with that. And then I went to school for the certification in alcohol and drug counseling at UMass Boston. And my professor was very entertaining because he was a Harvard graduate, and he was also a bank robber. And so I was enthused about having him as a professor because of my background in Charlestown. And when we were doing the criminal justice aspect of that course, he had picked me out of the class and said to me, "Why do you want to be an alcohol and drug counselor? And why do you want to be a criminal justice advocate in the court system?" And I said, "Because I want to help my friends get out of jail. And I want to make sure that I can help another alcoholic and drug addict to achieve sobriety." At the time, I was like 2 years sober and alcohol and drug free, and I thought that everybody had to be sober. So I wouldn't allow anybody into my life that either used drugs, sold drugs, or drank. I didn't go into many bars at all. If only in a necessity, I would be around alcohol. And that's how my life started to turn. And when it started turning for the good. I started gaining things back. After my divorce, I ended up homeless on a park bench, looking up at my house that I had bought in 1980. I bought that, and I paid $40,000 for it, and it's worth like 1.5 now. And my ex-wife still owns that house today. She doesn't live in it, but she still owns it and rents it out to a couple of doctors from Mass General Hospital. Things turn around for the good, and it takes a program to work it, and it takes people to help you along the way. And that's what we do. We help people to get better today. And that's when I had met you and Audra at Suffolk hockey game, and Audra's son was playing. I have a lot of friends that have played in the NHL, and I have some of my friends' kids play in the NHL today, and some of my friends' grandsons play in the NHL today, and my sister-in-law's cousins, they play. One plays for Ottawa, and one plays for Florida Panthers. And I've had many friends that have played in the Florida Panther system. My good friend's uncles, Keith Yandel, played for the Florida Panthers. He was the Iron Man. And that means that he played like, I think it's 964 consecutive games without taking a day off from playing in a game. And I've had other friends that have played too. I went to a game one time with a good friend of mine. His son was playing. His name's Jim Veazey, Big Jim, as we call him. He played for the St. Louis Blues, the Boston Bruins. He played in the Providence Bruins. He went to Merrimack College, and he was an outstanding star. But growing up with Jim, you could ask him anything about any sport, and he would know all about it. He was very knowledgeable, and he was like the leading goal scorer in Merrimack College. And he was the Hobie Baker Award winner back when he was leaving college. And Hobie Baker is the best collegiate hockey player in the country. And lo and behold, his son Jim Jr., little Jimmy Veazey, he won the Hobie Baker. So I don't know if there's anybody that, father and son that have won the Hobie Bakers together in over a period of time.
Let me stop you for a second because I know that you're passionate about hockey, but let me go back a little bit in time. Did you play hockey as a kid growing up? Because in the New England area, it's like you come out of the womb, you're playing hockey.
I did. I played youth hockey, high school hockey, and that's my mother. We didn't grow up rich, and I got the opportunity to go to Bobby Orr's hockey school in Aurora, Canada, and I went up there for 2 weeks and spent 2 weeks up there. And Bobby kind of took me under his wing up there because friends of ours that were friends of his, the Considines, Ian and Pat Considine, put the word in for me that, hey, take care of this kid. He's from Charlestown. And Bobby hung out in Charlestown. A couple of guys that were working for the Boston Garden. Pat Considine was the penalty box. He opened the penalty box door for the players. So there's a lot of players that I know that have spent a lot of time in that penalty box. And that's when I decided that when I started my life coaching business, it was going to be out of the penalty box LLC. And I still have that to this day. And I think it's about 8 years old now. And I've been doing it for 8 years. And getting people out of the penalty boxes, criminal justice system, advocating for them in court where treatment meets justice. People don't have to go to jail because they've made some bad choices with drugs and alcohol. And I'm a firm believer in that. And I enjoy helping those people. That's like my passion. In, like you mentioned, Section 12s and Baker Acts, they're basically Section 12 in Massachusetts, the same thing as a Baker Act in Florida. And I enjoy working on the Section 12s, helping those individuals and clients get into real treatment facilities and not sit in a hospital room in a hospital bed and just get medicated. So there's some people that need that, some, but not all, not most.
I'm going to come back to that because there's other stuff about you that's really interesting. I had Chris Nyland, Chris Knuckles Nyland on.
Yep, Chris, good man.
Tell me about your friendship with Chris, because he's obviously a very interesting guy in recovery, but was known as an enforcer in the NHL. So, talk about your relationship with Chris.
My relationship with Chris started back when Chris played for the Boston Bruins with Jim Vesey. And I was friends with Jimmy, and I became friends with Chris back in the 80s. And Chris hung around in Charlestown, and Chris has a very interesting story himself. And there's nothing that I wouldn't do for Chris because Chris has helped me along the way, and vice versa. He's a good guy. He helps a lot of people, and in the recovery world, and we've done some things together that are unknown to mankind, and we do recover. And Chris has recovered. I've recovered, and it's still one day at a time. We're not permanently recovered. We have to work our programs, and we have to keep a constant vigilance on our sobriety. And Chris was a great hockey player. He went to Northeast, and his story of how he got to the NHL is amazing with the help he got along the way. And I enjoy listening to the story about him getting to the NHL because it's true. When he says about him meeting the four guys outside the Boston Garden with was like Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson, and they spoke French, and he was like, "Hey, I'm coming to your camp. I'm coming to your camp." And he was in the car with Franny Flaherty, a friend of his from South Boston, and he told those guys, he gave those guys a ride to their hotel, and he was like, "I'm coming to your camp. I'm coming to your camp," and dropped the guys off at the hotel, the Montreal Canadiens, and lo and behold, Chris shows up at their Montreal Canadiens camp, and it's the kid. It's the kid. It's the kid that was in the car that day. He told us he was coming, and Chris ends up he had to fight his way up to the big league. And I can't think of anybody tougher than Chris Nyland.
Me neither.
He's fought some of the toughest guys in the NHL, Bob Probert, Terry O'Reilly. Chris has done he's fought a lot of people. And he tells a good story. He speaks around the country. He's spoken at a couple of events that we've been at, and he tells the truth, and the truth will set you free. And he's not afraid to tell the truth.
I don't think Chris is afraid of anything or anybody.
I don't think he's afraid of anything or anybody either. Sometimes he's a little hard with me too.
Let's change tunes for a second. Did I recall this correctly that you had a connection to Whitey Bulger?
Chris did, and
Chris did.
Whitey was the notorious Whitey Bulger. He ran South Boston, and
They made a movie about him.
they made a movie about him. And my brother-in-law Billy, his son just wrote the book about. They were like on different paths. They didn't communicate very well. It was, you're not going to tell me what to do, and that's it. That's how my brother-in-law was, and they had their own little. Whitey had his gang, and my brother-in-law Billy Coyman had his gang, and they were pretty feared. But they were the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. I'm talking about my brother-in-law. I know from a friend of mine said to me one time, I was living in South Boston and I was working with a friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, "Hey," he goes, "Can you take a ride with me?" He says, "I got to do a favor for Whitey." And I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah." So we went, I drove the car over to see these people, and he got out of the car and went over and he talked to them, and whatever he said to them, and it was for Whitey. I was like, "Well, no, I work for Whitey." It's one of those things, but I really didn't. It was like, it was something you wanted to claim fame to, but today I wouldn't claim fame to that. Even though it was Chris's father in law, we have different feelings about that situation. Feelings that I wouldn't want to talk about. I'm not going to expose people for who they are and what they are. We just, back in the day, we didn't deal with people that were federal informants. We didn't deal with it. And that was what they call a rat. And we didn't deal with that. And I know Chris probably had a hard time growing after that because Chris is more loyal than anybody that I know. As far as loyalty as being a friend, Chris will tell you right the way it is. Knuckles is like one of the most loyal people that you could ever meet, and he'll stand beside you if he thinks you're right. And he's done that. He's done that with me. He stood beside me, and we became great friends. And he's best friends with my friend Jimmy Vesey. And that whole era of Jimmy playing for the Bruins was like to see your childhood friend walk skate out onto the ice in a Bruins uniform was like something like out of a storybook. And Big Jim did it. He made it. And I've talked to him a couple of times about how it felt, and he had to work his way up to that level to be a National Hockey League player, just like him and Chris did. They fought their way up, and they were both good hockey players too. They weren't just tough guys; they were great hockey players. And I'm proud to call them my friends today. And life gets good when you have good friends in your corner.
I want to switch gears again with you. So there was an article about a gentleman named William Koyman. Does that name ring a bell?
Yes, that's my
So
brother-in-law.
it says federal prosecutors want to hold on to $180,000 in cash that was discovered in the luggage of a Boston man who died of a heart attack after getting off an Amtrak train in New York. William Koyman died in August after collapsing at New York's Penn Station. He was 75. In court papers, federal officials said they suspect the retired Teamster was transporting proceeds of drug trafficking. So tell me about that. Just another interesting aspect of the life of our good friend Jimmy Kane. Tell me about that.
So my brother-in-law he was like my father. He kind of taught me the streets growing up. He was married to my sister Kathy, and Billy was a unique guy, and he was a tough guy. He was a fair guy, and again, one of the nicest people that you'd ever want to meet. The name of the book is $2 Bill, and I was like mad when I first heard because my brother-in-law Billy said, "Don't no books. Don't ever write a book." And I was mad at this guy, Stuart Wood, who had someone had informed me that there was a book out there about my brother-in-law, and I was like, that can't be. That was his only wish, that he didn't want no books written. Well, I was very angry at this guy, Stuart Wood, who died in 2022. And I ordered the book on Amazon. I got the book, and I was like, looking at the front cover of the book, and I'm like, wow, like that's my brother-in-law on the front of this book. Like, how could this guy do that? And then I flipped the book over, and oh my God, it's his son, Billy Jr. had written the book. And that made me like so happy for Billy Jr. because he went through I got through the first 65 pages of it yesterday. I couldn't put the book down because it was that good, and it was right on point. And congrats to Billy Jr. for doing that. Even though I don't think his father wanted anybody else to write a book, but I'm sure he would be more than happy to have his son, Billy Jr., write that book. He did a lot of jail time throughout the years, and he did two jail sentences, one in Walpole State Prison in Massachusetts and one in Concord, New Hampshire. He always said to me, he said, if anything happens this week, Murphy's Law, and he would say, do this and this for me. And I did. When it happened, I did it. I went to see the right guys that would know what to do, and they went and did what they had to do to get him out. And Billy was a well respected guy, and he taught me a lot about life and being a good guy, too. And not just being a bad guy, being a good guy. He taught me some values, and I lived by those values for a long time after I got sober. When I got sober, and he He was like so proud that I didn't drink anymore because I was a pain in the ass when I drank. And usually it was him that had to bail me out of situations that I had gotten myself into because of my alcohol and drug use. It's a very interesting book. It's called $2 Bill. When I said, they already screwed it up when I'm looking at the front page because he wasn't $2 Bill. He was 2 mil Bill. That's what his nickname was, 2 mil Bill, because he gave more money away, in the same sense, borrowed more money for the next score, for the next time they did a score. So it's a pretty interesting book. And his son says in the book, he says, when he did the eulogy, how obviously I was at the mass when he did the eulogy. And the eulogy was, some of you out there owe my father money, but there's a lot of people out there that my father owes you money. He said, so let's like just move on and get over it. And it was pretty funny. He was trying to make light of a situation, but anyways, that's that part of the story with the mystery man on Penn Central Station. They found the money on the platform. The guys that it really was their money had a hard time getting that money back because nobody knew where the money was. And they were asking Billy Jr., where's the money? Is it in Bellevue Hospital, where they brought him to the morgue? That was the New York City morgue. And nobody knew where the money was. And they brought an innocent kid who was brought up in, his father was an underworld figure. And his son was a very educated man in the corporate world and had no idea why he was in this room with smoke glass windows. And there was two guys going to come in and question him about things that he didn't know about his father. His father didn't go and tell him, "Hey, listen, we're gonna go rob this $1 million armored car, and I'm gonna bring 500 home to you and mom." He, his son Billy didn't know anything about his like father's real lifestyle. He kept that private and private from his children. And then he ended up marrying my sister and was K Sarah from there on in. It was like my brother in law was Billy Coyman, and it was like having the keys to the laundromat. There was things that I've seen in his world where he lived and how he lived. Some of it was scary, but he was the nicest guy, and everybody loved Billy. Everybody loved Billy. I miss him dearly, and along with my brothers that have passed and my sister, I miss them all dearly because we all kind of drank together. We ran together. We were like, it was just part of life in Charlestown that the things and you can't talk about because of they had codes. The code of silence is a big thing in Boston. Charlestown was the code of, invented the code of silence, and yeah, that was just something that was just a natural thing that you were raised with. You didn't talk about other people or explain anything about crimes that were committed that you knew about or didn't know about. I myself personally, I didn't know anything. I'm like Sergeant Schultz. I don't know nothing.
I like that.
I don't know nothing. I had blinders on. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything. And you know what? That's the truth because I didn't see anything and I didn't hear anything.
Let me stop for a second. Talk about the movie The Town, because I know we've talked about that before. What is your connection to that Ben Affleck movie, The Town?
It just so happens that back in my heyday of drinking, I lived across the street from Ben Affleck on Cottage Street, Ben and Casey Affleck. And I used to come home from Charlestown and I'd go home to Cambridge after I got divorced, and not even while I was divorced or whatever. My poor wife, she knows everything. I would pull up in my car, and they would be across the street. And his mother was a Cambridge and Latin school teacher, and Ben and Casey and Matt Damon, they would be in the driveway with this stack of papers on the car, and I would come stumbling over, and I'd be talking to them, and I'd be drunk and they'd be sober and be like, "You guys are crazy. You're trying to produce this movie. You guys are crazy. Like, you guys are from Cambridge. You have no idea what we grew up in Charlestown with, and that could be a good movie," because they were trying to do what they were trying to become movie producers, and that stack of papers they had on the car was Goodwill Hunting. So that movie got produced and was a killer movie. It was a great movie, and the Matt Damon and Ben and Casey, they all had a part in producing it with Robin Williams, and I seen it, but I don't remember much because I was so drunk. And I remember I've met all his girlfriends that I'd go over and I'd have Christmas parties at my house, and I'd go over and knock on his door and say, "Hey Ben, can you come over and say hello to my mother and my family?" When he made it big before the town, and he said to me like I was a pain in the ass. Like he said, like, "Jimmy, listen." He goes, "If I come into your house, then I have to go to everybody's house on the street." He said, "I can't just come over to your house and not go to their houses," because he was a fair guy. When he made the movie The Town, I got mad because he mentions my brother Marty the electrician in the movie. That he used to get his cocaine from Marty the electrician, and he says that in one of the scenes. And I'm still mad at him to this day, whether he knows or not. And I hope he sees the podcast and I let him know that I'm mad that he mentioned my brother's name in the movie. My brother had been already passed. And the movie was very successful. Most of it was true. My friend Dennis plays the henchman with the 02129 in the flower shop. There's a lot of people that played parts in that movie that are really from Charlestown, and guys that gave Ben advice on the movie. My friend Hank is the MBTA guy that walks down the street and drives the bus. He plays, I think, the uncle of Ben, and he drives the bus away. He walks off the bus and leaves Ben the keys or something to that effect. I've watched the movie a few times. When he says, like, any peewee knows that if you really want to know, any peewee knows what a federal car is with the antenna that's 4 inches down on the back of the windshield. That's true. Everybody in Charlestown knew when the feds were in Charlestown because you'd see them circling around and you would say, wow, something must have happened. And it would usually 9 out of 10 times be a bank robbery or an armored car that they would be riding around Charlestown. And then on certain occasions, you would see them riding around just looking for anything to grab anybody on. And that's how we grew up. It was like, it was madness. Everybody, the whole town would party from Thursday to Sunday. Nobody really, a lot of people didn't have jobs and they had those flashy, fancy cars and all the girls. And that's how I wanted to be. I wanted to be that, but that didn't work out too well. A good hard day's work is the best way to do it. And that's what I do today. I help people, and I think I'm making amends for the lives that I ruined by selling drugs to them, like I said earlier.
All right, we're close to running out of time here. I know that you spend a lot of time working with families from all over the country. If a family wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to find you? Obviously, they can reach out to us and we can connect them with you, but maybe they just want to have a conversation with you about how you can help.
They can reach me. I have a website. It's kanelifecoaching.com. And they can go on the web and find my website. And those are all real people that leave reviews on there. Those are all real people that are willing to talk to families that are struggling with their family members. And I also work for a treatment facility in Florida called the Ambrosia with one of the best renowned psychiatric doctors that I've met along the way. He's helped countless people to overcome their fears. He does special treatment, ketamine treatment. He does brain mapping. He does TMS therapy. He does so much, and I've never seen any other facilities do what he does with his facility. And I'm a consultant for them, and I love working for him because he's a real deal. His name is Dr. Danish Alam, ALAM, and he's just the countless people from Massachusetts that we've sent down to Florida to help have really gotten help. It's not like it was back in the day when people would go down to Massachusetts, they would go to Florida, and they would get kicked out. There was a family from Medford, Mass, that sent their kid down to Florida, and he ended up dying, and they left him on the beach or something to that effect. But this isn't like that. When you go to the Ambrosia Treatment Center and you get the help that you need, and it's a real legit legal place. It's not a treatment facility that doesn't care about the clients. They've helped countless people, and I've advocated in court for them. We just did a couple the other day. We got a kid an extension. The judge would not give him an extension for his to stay in treatment. So we had written letters. I wrote a letter. Ambrosia wrote a letter, and the judge agreed to give this guy enough time to get the treatment done that he needs. And that guy's doing well today.
I love what you do. All right, Jimmy, thank you for coming on. There's so much more. I could have spent another hour with you, but we have another guest
It's a
coming up.
pleasure. I could talk to you about what we do, Section 12s and Section 35s in Massachusetts, and Baker Acts and guardianships. Everything that you do is what I love to do. And it's a pleasure to work with you and Audra and your team of legal parties. And we had the opportunity to meet your COO and Jennifer Douglas and Brittany, and now you have all this the greatest team I've ever seen, and I'm a pleasure to be a part of it.
Yeah, you are. You're an important piece. And for the folks that are watching, if you want to learn more about what we do, please check us out on the web, mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. And thank you for tuning in. And we will see you in our next episode. Take care. Bye bye.